Any comments anybody wishes to make about the previous meeting? Okay. Gone. Any interests anybody wishes to declare on the agenda? Gone. Admission of the public. We all happy for these items being public? Yep. Any deputations or petitions? It'd be a surprise to me if there were. Okay. Public question time. Any questions from the public? Can't see any public here. Work programme 2019-2020. Right.
Just to advise that Councillor Turner is here for this item to talk a bit about his priorities, which need to be considered as part of agreeing what your work programme is. There is also a request for a late urgent item, which is a paper on leaving the EU preparations. I just need to check that the panel is happy to take this and whereabouts on the agenda they're going to put that.
Okay. Anybody wish to say anything about that? No? Okay then. So straight on to the work programme 2019-2020. Do we want to give Graham the opportunity to go through first in terms of his priorities for the coming municipal year?
Can do if you want, Chair. They're not that much different really from last year. So we're going to continue to deliver a budget that achieves the best for Kirklees people, continue to deliver the access to services strategy, which clearly involves a modern, efficient library service. But we're also going to concentrate on the asset strategy for Kirklees, including in Cal, because there's quite a bit of things going on around Cal at the moment, and lead on more on corporate landlord for the rest of Kirklees. Okay.
Thank you. We've got an issue on commercialisation here, a paper here. So is that something you wish to comment on at all?
The commercialisation strategy is still being worked on. There's quite a bit of work that will be done over the summer. We're looking to come up with more of a detailed plan towards the autumn, did we say September, autumn time? So that's still being worked on. We had a briefing and a discussion on it on Monday, so that work is ongoing. But as I said, we'll have more of an idea later on the year. So maybe if you want to look at that, you look at that towards the end of the year or early next year. But the work is still ongoing, but we'll have some sort of a more detailed plan by September, we hope.
Just a quick point on that. We had a briefing from Oxford City Council probably about 6-7 months ago about their commercialisation strategy and what they were doing on income generation, and I'd just be interested to see if that feeds into the process.
We've been looking at all sorts of other local authorities and tactics that they've taken. As I said, we had quite a long discussion on Monday about this, and I'm sticking to the basic principles around what I believe commercialisation is, and that is doing what we do well, not necessarily competing with the private sector in certain areas, because we can't do that. So it's concentrating on what we do well, and also around commercialisation, you've obviously got the possibility of investment. Now, I'm very clear that if we look to invest, we wouldn't be investing outside outside our area. I don't think that's a wise thing to do. Lots of local authorities have done that. I don't agree with it. I can't see any reason why I want to change that. So if we are investing, it's investing in our own people, our own areas. I think it sends a very poor message out when you look at what other local authorities have done, where they buy shopping centres 200 miles from where the residents are. How that encourages investment, internal investment from private sector or other organisation, I think is debatable. So if we invest in property, etc., it will be within the authority, not outside. So we'll look to strengthen our own area rather than someone else's. I think exporting jobs and capital somewhere else is frankly, for me, wrong.
Okay, that's not entirely what Oxford City Council was about, but we can have that debate.
I haven't seen the Oxford one for a while, and I'd have to revisit it. So we went through a whole list of what other authorities have done on Monday, and there's a whole range of things that people have invested in, and some of it is invested in commercialisation of properties, etc. But a lot of those are out of area, and as I say, I think that is not my policy.
Okay, other members on the work programme. Any commentary on the work programme? Councillor Taylor.
It's just obviously tired. So the one thing that I haven't seen on the work programme that we would normally see through corporate scrutiny, and I think would be valuable in bringing back, is the work of the Democracy Commission. Because that normally sits within this.
The Democracy Commission has moved up to the Management Committee. It decided that at its first meeting. It wants to get an overview, and that doesn't mean that strands won't then go into the different panels.
So what I'm particularly interested in corporate scrutiny and looking at is, and I think it would be this panel that would look at that, was the elements around the work that we've been doing to try and understand the evolving role of councillors, the support that those councillors need as those roles evolve. Said that right? Then the broader engagement between councillors and officers, and how that place-based working would be shaping that.
I propose we take that view that you've made to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee, see what they say, and I'll certainly put your view forward at the next meeting. But I think if we can take that to them and see their view. Obviously, we don't want to overlap and do two lots of work, but let's take a view from them.
If I can just advise that Councillor Smage has met with the strategic director, and that was one of the areas that she picked up there. So I think she'll have a fairly clear view, but yes, we can pick it up at the next management committee.
Anything more on the work programme as exists? Gone. Next item. Dates of next meeting. I've got them in my diary, so I better turn up. Okay, so that comes to the end of the formal meeting, but that doesn't mean... Urgent item, of course. I was wondering whether that's part of the informal agenda. Okay, well, let's go straight to Brexit. You might not have heard of this term before. It's about leaving the European Union, and of course that's going to have an impact on life in a rather fundamental way. Who's going to speak to this first? Thank you.
Okay. Morning. So I will be brief. You have a short paper in front of you which sets out, in particular, our preparations in the event of the UK leaving the European Union. So it is about very much thinking about what the impact of that will be on Kirklees as a district, and then on Kirklees Council in particular. I think our approach is centred on looking at both the short-term impacts and then some of the more medium and longer-term impacts, and the short-term impacts being particularly focused around our resilience. The approach that we've taken has been primarily to look at how we use some of our existing routes and capacity to support our preparations. So as a couple of examples, working through the Regional Resilience Forum at a West Yorkshire level to join up with our counterparts around resilience and emergency planning. And then also working through some of our established channels around community issues and community tensions, and the monitoring that goes on around that, to make sure that we're picking up an understanding of the impact of both the exit from the EU, but also the preparations for the exit around the EU within our communities. We've put an emphasis on working with partners both within Kirklees district and beyond. So we're joined up with, for example, the CCGs in terms of thinking about at a short-term level the potential impact in terms of supply chains around medical supplies. And then, as I say, we're joined up at a West Yorkshire and regional level, so we're part of a regional network of local authorities that have been engaging with MHCLG on a weekly basis. It was up until Easter time, That has, as the paper says, some of our activity has slowed a little bit over the summer after the leave date was put back to the end of October. Our intention is that come the beginning of September we will start to, and this is reflected across the region as well, that we will start to then ramp up again. We think that the preparations that we've put in place currently stand for the level of information and understanding that we have about potential scenarios. But our plan in the light of the 31st of October leave day is that we would start to ramp up some of our activity back up again, just to make sure that we are prepared should we exit on the 31st of October. The papers that you have in front of you then identify some of the thinking and preparation that we've done. So you'll see that obviously exit from the European Union is on our corporate risk register, and you'll see that within that we're thinking about particular categories, so economic uncertainty, as I mentioned, potential impacts around cohesion and community tensions being sort of a couple of the key ones, as well as a whole set of finance-related issues. And then you've also got in your pack, and I appreciate that these papers are late into this meeting, you've got our tactical plan, which sets out some of our the governance structures that we've put in place to make sure that as an organisation we're satisfied that we're monitoring the situation and checking that we are as prepared as we can be with the information that we have available.
Okay, I'm going to hand this over to members initially. Will?
Hi, this is a bit of an open-ended starter question, but you said about regional resilience work. Can you just explain what sort of work is actually ongoing with regard to that? What sort of analysis have we got?
Thank you. So our emergency planning team are part of a West Yorkshire Resilience Forum that looks at a whole set of issues in its day-to-day business, never mind specifically to Brexit. So they would be concerned about things like the impact on supply chains. They'd be concerned around things like the impact on logistics, so the potential disruption as a result of shift in activity in the ports on some of our major highways. So they would be kind of interested in those sort of things, and the preparations that then go with that. That team is also then the route for within our organisation into our business continuity champions, which sit within all the departments and services within the organisation. And so it is a route for thinking about, well, what at a quite a detailed level, what are the potential impacts, and then what do we do to mitigate any risks that we've identified. The Regional Resilience Forum also then is another route through into government and has conversations with civil servants within government that were they had moved to a daily basis at one point towards the end of March before the date got put back. So they're a route to connect our own local preparations with what's going on at a regional and a national level.
So obviously the way that we leave, i.e. with or without a deal, will have a massive impact on the area and how we respond as a council and on a regional and national level. And also massively impact different sectors. Obviously under a no deal, different sectors are going to face different levels of tariff. I know that the government, I think it was about last year, did an impact analysis of potential scenarios. Do we have any analysis on either a Kirklees or a West Yorkshire level about differential impacts that we could expect from the expected scenarios now of a no deal or some kind of free trade agreement, given what we know about the type of businesses that we have in our area?
Yes, I guess the answer is yes, we do have some sector level information. So this is about different economic sectors rather than within the local authorities. That's your question, isn't it? Yes, we do. So West Yorkshire Combined Authority Commission, working with the Chambers Commission, a quarterly survey of businesses, and that provides us with some intelligence at a West Yorkshire level that we can drill down to an extent at a Kirklees level. The data is just about is robust enough to do that. We also have our economy and infrastructure team work quite closely with with Mid Yorkshire Chamber of Commerce. So we ran an event, for instance, at the back end of March, to talk to businesses more direct, so as well as like the survey-based information, to talk to them about their levels of preparedness and to try and get an understanding of the potential different impacts. I'm not sure that that comes up with any surprises. So we know that if businesses are trading internationally and have large markets in Europe, if in particular, if they're part of supply chains which move things backwards and forwards, then there's going to be the potential is a much higher impact. And we know that obviously across Kirklees we have a strong manufacturing base, which is therefore then potentially hit as a result of that. We do know that some of our trading activity within businesses across the district is there's a reasonable proportion that is outside of the European Union as well. So we do know that there's some resilience, and it's not obviously that all trade necessarily will be affected, although clearly with no deal, then certainly in the spring there were concerns that still might be impacted because of the disruption in terms of logistics. So yes, I think we have both kind of statistical and sort of relationship routes that give us that insight into potential impact on businesses across sectors in the district.
That's been looked at also by the LGA Brexit Task Force. So that's representing local government on this at a national level, and so that's another area. John?
Yeah, just a slightly different tack, actually. Just looking at the risk register. Just looking at the risk register, one risk that I haven't spotted is around the financial markets and the impact on financial markets, because they're notoriously sensitive to any uncertainty. And I mean, it talks about the financial markets in terms of could lead to another recession. I'm interested in what plans we've got, if any, in our Treasury team to just forward think and look forward to, if there are impacts on the financial markets, have we put in place some mitigating factors to make sure that we're not too exposed? Because that's that could turn out to be a significant risk for us. And it's just not picked up anywhere in here, so it's just one to perhaps, I'm not necessarily asking for an answer, but it's one to take away and go, let's just check that we have thought this through and we understand what impact that would make. And the other one I was going to ask about again is looking, internally at Kirklees. Have we identified critical systems or processes which are dependent perhaps on some critical aspect of it that is provided by a partner in the EU? You talked a little about working with the CCGs and maybe impacts or disruption to medical supplies, but are there other things that are internal to us where we might have some IT systems that are dependent on software that's provided by a Dutch firm or something like that, and if there's any disruption, would that cause a problem for us internally? Just have we got those covered, and just give a bit of reassurance on that, really, please.
Just to take the point about finance, I think absolutely. I mean, the thing about a corporate risk document is always it's going to be very high level, but there is a lot of work from that Treasury team in terms of trying as best they can to understand what the fluctuating markets impacts might be, and we plan for that through our budget process. But obviously this panel can ask that more detail because finance comes under your remit, so we can bring that back when we do the next meeting and the finance update.
Section 151 officer, as Rachel's already said, is acutely aware of that, and he's testing some kind of scenarios against what the markets might look like and where that leaves us. At the moment, the scenarios we've tested don't show that we would be at significant risk, but we haven't gone to worst case scenarios or doomsday scenarios as yet. But I think that would leave many organisations exposed, and we would, in terms of financial markets, the role of government becomes central in trying to stabilise how the markets operate and what they might achieve to try and unlock some of the I guess some of the barriers we're going to witness if we see a no deal scenario. Yeah.
It's probably fair to say that local government operates in a very uncertain financial framework anyway, and this adds another element of uncertainty. But seeing as we don't know what money we're going to get from one year to the next most of the time, then we are used to operating to a degree in uncertain times. Not that this makes things any better, but it at least means that we're sort of used to that. I got John next. Oh, right, okay.
Do you want me to pick up on the second part around critical systems and dependency on EU partners? So across the council, we've done some interrogation of our service provision at a service level to look at whether there is any impact. So our business continuity champions have drilled down. So the IT example that you gave is a good one, where we've looked at some of those supply chains and some of those dependencies. In none of, although in IT we do have supply chains that take us internationally, in none of that work have we identified anything that is that is likely to create an issue in terms of some of those critical systems. But we have done that drill down to check it. Yes.
And by system, I don't mean literally just the IT system. I mean the end-to-end delivery system. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On the first report on item 3.5 there, we've got other, which is legal, financial or human resources. We've got earmarked £210,000 from central government is now in reserves. I think my question would be, how much do we estimate has already been spent? How much do we estimate that we will be spending before the 31st of October? And will there be a shortfall?
To be honest, in terms of the government allocation, we've kind of allocated it for emergency uses should we need it. To date, we haven't needed to use any of those monies. In terms of kind of preparedness and what we would press the button on in terms of actions, at this stage we've got a strong emergency planning approach to most things in terms of major incidents. We've beefed that up in the context of Brexit. And allocated sort of some of the staff resources we would need to mobilise to deal with any kind of shocks. To date, we don't really know what we might have to spend it on, if I'm being honest, because our conversations with business, for instance, are demonstrating that they have different levels of preparedness, at times based on how they may have voted, so they have a more positive outlook if they've voted for Brexit. If they voted Remain, there are issues. What we ought to say, I guess, is that whilst the short-term impacts are being thought through now by business and the Chamber of Commerce, what they're not doing at this stage is the mid to long-term planning, and I think we've nudged the Chamber to start thinking about that and offered our support wherever possible in terms of the enabling functions we might have. In terms of services, we've looked at what the labour market would do. To answer Councillor Taylor's question around systems and processes, and at this stage, we would have to just put our usual processes in place if we had short-term skill shortages. And respond in that way. I mean, it's not a huge pot of money that government have given us, so we're going to, in terms of greater shocks, we're going to have to rely on our revenue reserves in terms of the strategic risk reserve we've set aside for it. Yeah.
Thanks. I'll just following on from Nas said, we've done as much as we can possibly do, but unfortunately there's too many unknowns at the moment, isn't there? We can make it's an educated guess, but some of this is a finger in the air, isn't it? And if you look at some of the worst case scenarios, and I was watching a really interesting program from the director of the Bank of England the only other day, if a no deal Brexit reduces the economy by 9%, is the money from government that they're giving us, it's quite frankly a drop in the ocean, isn't it? Because we're going to be all in dire financial straits, as it will with the government. But also interesting that the banks have been stress tested to make sure they can cope with possibly worst case scenario. So that's sort of reassuring that there is capital in the system should we need it. But there's just too many unknowns, I think. And I think I'm just looking at the work programme, and I think the 15th of November meeting might be a meeting where you can only make a recommendation. You look at the impact of Brexit, because by then, theoretically, we will be out, and we will have certainly seen, I said theoretically, we will have seen some of the immediate impacts, and I think that will be a good point to start looking at some of those, because we will have a bit clearer idea on what financial impact it's likely to have on us. So that's my recommendation to you. Of course, it's up to you entirely. But as I said, a lot of work has been done, but there's just too many unknowns at the moment to make an honest, fair, have we got it all covered? We'd be silly to say yes. We've done what we can.
Okay, so shall we have, I think all the three councillors want to say, can we have 3 quick councillor comments on that? Do we have? I think you had an answer which was basically everything's unknown, no.
Sorry, in terms of what we have spent to date, we've just used existing resources to mobilised existing resources under our usual business continuity and emergency planning type regime. So really, in terms of an additional cash, we haven't spent any of that money that has been allocated to us by government as a potential pot of money.
Too many unknown unknowns.
Mine's a quick one, actually, and thank you for referring back to the original report, because it reminded me I made a comment on it. Under 3.4, improving outcomes for children, can I just make a plea? We've quite rightly picked up care leavers, but can we just extend that a little bit? Because we really have a responsibility for people who have left our care for a little longer. So, can we just maybe just take a look at perhaps people who left our care, or perhaps under, say, 25 or something like that, we're giving them the support, because they probably haven't got the family and the resources around them they might need for that kind of thing. So it's just an extension, really.
Good point. Certainly know that happens for K&H people. That happens anyway, but not necessarily everybody. Will?
Sort of goes back to my first question. It's on one of those unknowns that we've been talking about. You've mentioned EU supply chains, and we've looked at how that could affect and how we can mitigate that working with partners. I think one of the things that's been missing from the Brexit debate from even before it was voted for is that we don't just have free trade and supply chains with the EU. As members of the EU, we have free trade deals with over 60 other countries around the world. And I think Naz said we haven't looked at the worst. I meant the Brexit, the referendum before it. Yeah. And Naz said we haven't yet done the sort of the worst case scenario financial resilience, I think, didn't you? Do we have sort of an analysis not just of how EU supply chains could be affected, but how we'll be affected if we're on WTO terms and we lose those trade deals with the 60 other countries around the world that we currently have? Not necessarily, but probably.
We've had a couple of business breakfasts with the Chamber and local businesses to try and understand some of that, where that planning is getting to, and what the opportunities that WTO trading arrangements might get businesses in Kirklees. And if you kind of appreciate that 90-95% of our businesses in Kirklees are small businesses, that kind of planning regime doesn't exist in the kind of the current business profile of the Kirklees district, which is why we're trying to get the Chamber to start thinking about that mid to long term planning. So, our assessment of and it's shared across the West Yorkshire Regional Forum, is shared at regional and national level, is that the Brexit impact, whichever terms we leave by, is likely to be a bumpy road. So we're not going to see any big spikes necessarily. Well, we will probably in the short term, but then we might stabilise, dip again, stabilise, maybe go on the rise a little bit. So it's going to be a bumpy road in the mid to long term in terms of economic impacts and impacts on other parts of our services and systems. So trying to get our businesses to think about that, because I don't think the council on its own can understand and assess what trade deals are going to do for the economy, because we're second guessing how people will want to run their businesses. So we need the businesses to help us understand that, and nudging them at the moment is where we're at, to try and say, you must not just plan for 31st of October, you have to plan beyond that. Is if you're not trading with Europe, who are you trading with, and where can you place your products? And do we understand the regulatory construct around that, in terms of, you know, if you're a provider of pharma, for instance, you know, what are the regulatory barriers or opportunities that other places, you know, the 60 countries you mentioned, will impose on us. So some businesses are doing that now, but not many. Yeah.
Okay. Nathan, I was going to say.
Hi. Since we voted to leave the EU 3 years ago, and there's already been 2 extensions, there's a good chance that we won't leave on the 31st of October. And there's also quite a big national demand for a second referendum. Is there a similar plan or risk assessment for if we vote not to leave the EU? So already things like, you mentioned financial markets quite a lot. There's been business investment that has been pulled back and other people have invested more. There's immigration that's decreased, that's likely to increase if we vote not to leave the EU. I'm just wondering, is there a similar document or within this plan, is there anything to handle that?
So if we don't have a zombie apocalypse, how do we approach things? Yeah.
So we haven't done any planning on such a scenario. We've been very focused on looking at the leaving the EU type scenarios and what impacts that has on the various you know, things like people, processes, community cohesion, logistics and distribution, supply chains. I guess it's a scenario that we haven't visited at this stage, is because, dare I say it, it's business as usual, is it not?
The only thing that I would add to that is that in some of the work that we're doing at the moment, it isn't just looking at the point of leave. So some of the work that we're tying into in terms of sort of cohesion impact is as much about what's the result of the uncertainty as a result of impact as well. So that there are elements of the work that we do that kind of is about the lead into as much as the end point of, and so which isn't we're prepping for that, but which does show that we're kind of thinking about the potential impacts rather than single impact.
Okay. Can I ask you, Councillor Turner, on this, are we confident that we've got good links in with the LGA, with West Yorkshire partners, to give a political response to, in our role as the council, to national government? Are we keyed in? Are we doing things already through that? Are you aware that we're actually using those routes currently?
Yes, we've obviously been looking at and working with any partners on the potential outcome, but as you know, some of this has said, these unknowns, and the difficulty, I suppose, is talking to government, because necessarily they don't know. They know less than us in some ways, because they're just the system to operate at the moment. So yes, we're still talking to people in the LGA, the West Yorkshire. It's obviously in the agenda item quite frequently, but what we can do beyond make decent, educated guesses is really difficult. And it was interesting, the question about what happens if we don't leave. We've enough problems trying to sort out what happens if we do, so I don't know how would address that, because I don't know, that throws a whole new set of unknowns, doesn't it? How that may affect social cohesion, how that some of the public may react to that. So that will be a piece of work in itself. So let's deal with what we think we know, that theoretically we're leaving the 31st of October, and if anything changes in the meantime, then we'll be swift enough to react to that, I'm sure. But let's deal with what we think we know, rather than that would be a total guess, wouldn't it? What would happen if we failed to leave at any point? As I say, the social cohesion, and that's one of the things that's in this paper, isn't it? How we deal with that, that would be a whole different scenario. But we are quick enough to react, I believe, to change tack if that was to be the outcome.
I think it's like talking about Brexit and talking about the weather have become two sort of English characteristics, neither of which I like. So shall we draw a close that item? Because, hey, we're going to come back to it. But I think Councillor Turner's suggestion that we keep it on the agenda for the next meeting, well, the October meeting, is a good one. And November is a good one. So if we can have it as an item for October and November, and we will keep an eye on it. Okay. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.